Well, is there any further discussion on that, or do you just want to move forward with? Patients?
Just so I'm, well, yeah,
Policy amendments. So, and that's, it's gonna change, and we're gonna. Okay, so as far as I understand, we are, on JD, you're going to. Leave. We're gonna leave the changes we made last time to. Lines 50 through 53. And that one strikeout 47, 48, and then. Suggestion is to. Strike out. And intramural sports on line 107 and 106.
yeah, the titles.
Oh, right, thank you, yeah. Fixed, and then, strike the whole section H. And obviously now read letter. Rest of the policy. There we go.
That's the recommendation, yes.
So because we're eliminating H. Is a student athlete allowed to play in the girls' team? So we're just not addressing the issue.
We're prohibited from allowing that by state law.
So
Yeah.
athlete, a transgender athlete cannot play in the girls' team. Is what this is saying.
Male transitioning into a female cannot play on the female. That's what the
Because
state
it's
law.
state law.
Mhm.
Didn't we have the,
Despite the fact that these two lawsuits are pending, doesn't, I always thought that we had to wait for those two lawsuits to be solved.
Well,
I think that's what we were doing. and
we
then-
were, but then the Supreme Court said that you can't have blanket injunctions.
Okay, I
So
didn't
the injunctions now only pertain
do
to
those two.
parties,
Okay.
the litigating parties. So since we were not a party to the suit, the injunction doesn't apply to us.
cause we had done JJIC, right? If I remember correctly, which was our eligibility for scholastic, interscholastic athletics. And we had gotten in line, I think, with the statute, with the JJIC. And JBAB was like, not sort of in line with what JJIC said at that point.
Which is why I think we shifted to just saying. We'll
The
Well-
NH, yep,
approach it consistent with the NHIA, because at that time they were. Well, we didn't want to have to change it every time something changed, so I think that was why we
yeah,
thought as long as we're remaining eligible for. Participation with them, that was safe, but now it sounds like that's no longer.
How can the NHIAA not go by the state law?
it is.
I think they are, they're
They-
just not
Yeah, they are.
wanting to.
They have to,
State it.
but they're not adopting a policy that's, so there's no policy
They should.
guidance that
One way and the other.
they've resisted, as you have, stating that you're following the state law.
And
So that doesn't help your teachers because they're not gonna find a policy that gives them the correct guidance.
why do we have the NHIAA? They're not gonna give us guidance.
I
They do.
think everyone's,
They have a lot of guidance on a lot of other things.
Right.
but everyone's struggling with this issue and the new, slew of statutes that came out in the last legislative session.
And no one wants to be the first to name the policy. That says, I guess.
But that, the important point is that failure to comply brings with it significant penalties and liability to the city, including attorney's fees. So we're trying to comply with the law as best we can and, avoid that. We're not gonna roll the dice. as
So-
teams.
If the legislature changes in the next cycle and it's all, I mean, this could all change.
It absolutely could all change. And if that lawsuit progresses, and invalidates the law, everything could change. Yes. you know, if the court finds the law is unconstitutional, that's not gonna apply to just two school districts. Yes.
Crazy times.
It is crazy times and are probably more than you want to know about the legal system, so.
Okay. Forward.
What are you resolved to do
Mhm.
the changes as? You got that? Okay.
Good.
So,
Alright.
sorry, is this gonna, cause we had some stuff in my baby the last time, but we haven't had a board meeting since then.
Right, that's why we just.
So we're gonna sort of combine their last, okay.
Yeah.
So the full change will
And now-
the board meeting next week.
Yeah.
And that will be 2 readings still, right?
Have we only done one? Single read, is that what I remember?
Yes, but I think at the last policy decided, doesn't matter
We
what.
want to start over.
Right, start over.
Yeah.
Okay, do we want Susan at that meeting?
It's on my calendar.
Oh, yeah, for non-public, yeah.
Can we move it up to the agenda? Do you want us to move it up in the agenda? We can do that.
Sure, that's great. And if you want to
You
do,
always have the policies at the end, right?
Yes, but our plan is to have a non-public first to go over
Oh, right, okay, okay.
this one and JLP, right? So Susan's gonna be at that for sure.
Yep.
And then
In the
you
regular.
can sort of,
we'll
I mean,
see if they
can
want,
see at that point if.
Yeah.
Okay,
they may,
but it
want-
wouldn't hurt to make the policy, just to, so that if she does need to
She can
stay.
go home.
Yeah, exactly. Or we can suspend the rules and do it.
Right. Yeah, that's what we'll do.
Okay.
and these other policies are not nearly as contentious as mine.
No, they are not. So far.
Excellent.
So we did get a lot of feedback on these calls, like there were several that people wanted us to revisit from the board meeting, so that's for a little bit unusual, but. People said that. So Paula, did you make any changes to these based on our discussion at the board meeting or?
No,
Okay. So. Alternative learning plans. I think the major concern here was. There was a lot of discussion about the superintendent's designee.
Yeah.
And that, and whether that was the appropriate level of approval for each plan. So Patty, do you want to speak to that? I think I know you did in the board meeting a little bit, and you.
Yeah, and anytime it says superintendent designee, that could be principal, that could be anybody else in the system. And I think by leaving it a superintendent or superintendent's designee, you leave it more open than to say it has to be the principal, because if the principal's not available, or does principal mean assistant principal? That like, I don't see an issue with leaving it as superintendent or designee. But I know that there was conversation about just putting it into the building as the building's sort of management. So you could change it to the principal or principal's designee.
Oh, I see, yeah. Do you think at some point we'll have a specific person who is responsible for this?
It all
Sometimes
depends
it's
on,
development.
it all depends on budget, what positions we have, who is in charge of that. I'm particularly looking at lines 186 when it talks about superintendent or superintendent's designee, because that's tied to a dollar amount. And that's one place that I do think it needs to have some sort of a recourse to come back to central office about, hey, this is gonna cost X amount of dollars, like, is there a proof? Like, there needs to be some sort of conversation with central office. So that's where I kind of lean and say it's okay to leave it that way, because it says ideally the superintendent or designee's decision will be made you don't want the principal deciding on spending $2,000 on a program. And that never comes back to central office, that isn't factored into the budget, and suddenly we're out 2,000 or whoever knows how much money. That's just another check on spending of money. That might need to stay, but you could change line 209 to principal and designate will evaluate applications. That's one place that you might be able to make that swap. But I'm very concerned about making it anytime that it's tied to a dollar amount, because you want to have that conversation at central office.
Okay. And I think the concern as I heard it was that it was yet another responsibility that we were adding to the superintendent's office and that with the number of these approvals that might be happening. Unrealistic, but again,
But I think budget is under the purview of the superintendent, so maybe not application for students, so on line 209, yeah, you can leave that with the principal or designee.
Yeah.
But anytime you're spending money, I would be very concerned about letting that be made at a building level. Because we don't know what potential programs, what potential expenses could result from some of this. You want to have some tether and oversight.
I don't remember what the exact objection was in the past first reading with this, but we wanted to review it, right?
Yeah,
yeah, I think the objection was a concern that it created barriers for people and that it would sort of intimidate people from applying if they felt like it was a board level.
I mean, I feel like this language, superintendent and superintendent designee, is like sprinkled all through
It
our
is.
policies.
Yes.
Because the point is to like have it flexible so that you can delegate or
Yeah.
you can delegate to whomever, so. I don't know if I agree with the concern there. I think it's totally flexible in terms of be that person.
Well,
but again, if you want
in
to question
209
209 is the place to put it.
yeah, and I think maybe the board would appreciate that. That change, especially because and tell me if I'm wrong, Susan, in reading it this way, but if it says principal or designee, does that have to be the principal's designee, or could that still be someone designated by the superintendent?
Mine says the superintendent or designate.
If you change it to principal or designee.
It would be either or.
Okay, so maybe that's perfect.
It would be either.
Flexibility.
Got a little bit of flexibility.
But it also
Still have
helps
those
define.
Yeah,
It just means the superintendent can't evaluate, which seems weird to me.
It would
No,
not be in the
no.
superintendent's hands.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's sort of like,
Yeah.
Unless the superintendent was the one designated to do it.
by,
He wants the superintendent to make the designation,
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
not the principal.
I appreciate your attention, Patty, to.
I'm just responding to,
Yeah.
the concern, but I don't think.
I just don't know what language.
Is that realistic though, that the superintendent is going to evaluate all applications?
Well, and that's not that's not what I'm reading. I'm reading the superintendent is assigns someone to do this,
Right.
and then they will execute. Yeah.
Okay.
If I were the superintendent, I read this, I'd be designating a lot of people.
Well, right,
Right?
I think it's.
A guidance counselor. and-
Yeah, it could be anybody.
They have to-
It'll be like an internal policy.
Okay. I mean, my concern is that we want consistency, I would think. So what we don't want is like a different person getting designated for each approval, because
And that wouldn't necessarily be the case with this, because with those alternative learning plans, they exist in some form right now. You wouldn't be, we don't have enough people to give everybody one anyway. So
Right.
it would fall under, like Nancy was saying, counseling, or maybe it's the ELO coordinator, whoever it would be the same person. But also leaving the superintendent on there if there was ever a concern.
Right.
The superintendent could step in and say, well, let me take a look at that. You know, maybe that does make sense for that particular student. Maybe that does make sense for proximity, or maybe that cost is okay. Could be some involvement in people.
Okay, so it sounds like we'd like to leave those alone.
I just don't know what other language makes sense, I think.
I think
So
if
we
it
could-
comes up,
Yeah,
you can say something because
I think if it comes up, I'd just be like, I think I would ask what specific language would be more flexible than what this is. Right,
Right.
if that's the purpose of it.
Well, and it was not just more flexible, but I think it was. It was I was Karen, I think, who was concerned that it would, that it would create, it'd be sort of like an intimidation factor for people trying to apply for these things. And if it felt like a board level appeal process, then that would be a lot. But I think it's also one of the things that because we're in the process of developing this, the whole process around it a lot, that, that we may come to some decision and define a person, as you said, Patty, like down the road, we might, once the system becomes more solidified, we might figure out who that designee is, and it might be the same person, but we just don't have that information yet. So, okay,
just looking quickly at the alternative program. The program shall be approved by the board. Each student shall participate in a state assessment exam. Staff assigned to a program will meet the same licensure. Student services will be provided. School year will be the same. Diploma requirements will be the same. Anything supervised by the principal shall be considered part of that school for reporting and assessment. And anything supervised by a district level administration shall be considered a separate school of the district for reporting and assessment. So just some things to consider. I don't think we're gonna fall into any issues. I think when we think about alternative programs, this really doesn't fall in there because they're the alternative learning plans, not programs. I think we're good.
Do we have many students that do this?
No. But again, recall that this was opened up now from just being for students on IEPs. to now anybody can do this because the whole reasoning behind the 306 revision was to provide more flexibility, less funding to high schools and districts so that students can matriculate through quicker. So no, but students could take advantage of this. And at least now there's parameters around what counts, who's reviewing that, what does it have to have? Instead of being, okay, I'm giving you this one and somebody else gets something different and a bit more stability.
am I understanding you correctly that the board only has the oversight when it's going to impact the budget?
What line are you on?
I'm in section 2 of C approval process. So, yeah, expenditures exceeding the dollar limit is will present to the board. Okay. So, but otherwise, the board doesn't get to approve. plan,
Because
right?
sometimes the plans are things like if a student decides to family's going abroad, because if the father was sent for work for 3 months to Portugal, could I do a report on Portugal and its connections to the United States in place of a social studies class? That could be a plan.
Okay.
It might not cost anything, but if
Right.
there is a cost, and then that also brings up the purchasing procedures that the business office looks at, which is again why I think the superintendent needs to be involved, because if we're doing something that requires a purchase or materials required, or there's some sort of a RFQ that has to be, we want to make sure we're following all of that. Not every plan is going to require cost.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out the board role here, because in line 60 or 162. it Says if the learning plan is approved by the superintendent or if required, the school board. There's two those there, by the way. The principal will have responsibility for overseeing implementation of the plan. So in what situation would the school board be responsible?
only under that paragraph two, C2, if it
Okay,
involves.
only if it impacts the budget.
Right.
Okay.
It doesn't give a dollar amount though. What is, or doesn't it?
It talks about the other, this is where the purchasing plans come in and the,
I mean, if it's like
Speaking of
$100,
dollars,
the school board's not gonna have to, where is it?
It says
Well,
the dollar
It
amount
doesn't.
specified above, but I haven't found the above
I
yet.
haven't even
I thought
seen it.
it had said somewhere that it was. It's referenced back. It would require additional appropriation or.
Okay, it's 124. It's such a planning program requires special expenditure beyond what is budgeted.
Oh, yeah.
The superintendent will present the plan to the school board for approval.
Okay, I remember we
Yeah.
put in that language.
Yeah.
What is budgeted?
Okay. Then that question.
So that's the specific dollar amount.
Yeah, so if it's outlined for line of the budget, then we need to, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
all that did you catch the double thought on line 163?
What was it?
There's a double thought on line 163.
Okay, got it.
The.
The principle.
And then otherwise, second reading, no other changes.
It was simple. I think it was just that we talked about adding a reference to,
See IHBI to the policy where policy IK was called out.
yes, exactly.
There it is. Okay.
So,
Line 11, policies IH,
yeah,
IHBI and IK.
Yeah.
That was easy. Yeah, quick
Okay.
going.
okay.
That's on this one. Sure.
Please,
No.
See, Carrie Noty questioned the impact of this policy, explaining that it was essentially a curriculum review cycle, which is important to have in the district as it allowed for planning on the curriculum side as well as budgetary. Questions about putting the board in charge of ensuring that the schools have appropriate resources was raised, prompting review of the language by the policy committee.
So yeah, line 21, instead of the school board is responsible. I think we wanted to say something like the Portsmouth School Board designates the superintendent as responsible for.
Yes, exactly.
Do you want it just in conjunction with? Or do you want it,
Now,
do you want all the authority designated?
I think we want to designate the authority to.
Yeah.
Designates the superintendent as responsible for it.
Now, why are we not just saying the superintendent is responsible for ensuring? Which we do in other things.
You could. Yeah, I think it was the wording of the 30608.
Okay. Yeah, and there was a request to pull what we needed to directly from the rules rather than saying and any more than we needed to.
That's right, it wasn't the law, it was the. Yes.
So 30608 says the local school board shall require that each school. That's why.
Right, and that's what we wanted.
So- And by saying the school board designates the superintendent.
Yeah.
you're still doing
Fair enough.
all the
Yeah.
list.
So that's why, that makes sense. So the school board designates the superintendent as responsible, yep, sure. Okay,
Yes.
and then in terms of trying to stick specifically to the 306.
Talks about providing a developmentally appropriate collection of resources aligned to learning and grade levels, including online and print materials.
Already do this.
Yes, but that's what's in the 306. Organized and accessible to students. Accessing information. So that whole first part is the first part of the policy.
So that is, I'm not finding. this.
Provides a developmentally appropriate collection of resources aligned to all learning and grade levels, including online and print materials, equipment, and technologies that shall be necessary to support the curriculum, as well as the learning needs of all students.
Are you reading that from the 306
Yep.
or from?
Yeah.
So we don't have it in this policy. do we?
Provides that resources are as appropriate, organized, and accessible to students, staff, parents, and managed through circulation. And then the second part starts on line 53. Well, what I just read begins on line 43.
Oh, okay.
And then the second part starts on line 53.
Okay, so 43 and 53, those two sections you're saying are direct
Yep.
from.
And line 76 implements a plan approved by district administration for ongoing development, organization, acquisition, maintenance, replacement, and updating of curriculum and learning resources necessary to support the needs of students.
Line 78.
Oh,
78, yeah.
So that's coming right from the 306.
Yep.
And then the other stuff though, the lists.
The stuff from lines 24 to 42 does not come out of the 306s.
So these are just from the SBA.
But what it speaks to is the information or the resources being developmentally appropriate. Aligned to learning and grade levels. So the board could decide to remove lines 24 to 42 and put in. Well,
Yes,
could put in including online and print materials, equipment, technologies, and get rid of the rest of that. If you don't agree with what's in the list from lines 26 to 42.
well, kind of,
I think the concern there, if I'm understanding it correctly, was that we want to try to stay away from specifying things that could be considered curriculum.
Mhm.
But to me, these items aren't a list about the curriculum. They're more about our values of what we.
And if you look at lines 8 through 14, the strikeout,
that's where.
it's where it came from.
Yeah.
So we had that already.
Oh,
It's not new.
right.
It's enumerated and it's presented a little bit differently. I mean, what's new is being current, which you kind of want them studying maps that don't say USSR, I would think.
Am I reading this, sample policy wrong because it has that list at the bottom here?
Right, but we're looking at the red line.
Yeah, I know, but what you're talking about, enrich and support the curriculum.
But we were looking at the difference between what the 306 rules actually state versus what they don't. So,
Is this the 306?
no, that's the
Sample
New
policy.
Hampshire
Sample
sample
policy, okay.
for the New Hampshire school board.
There's 6 rules, the second list, A through J. Sort of what's being lifted, I think, from the PSSs.
Mhm.
And that first part where it's enumerated is sort of iterative of what was there previously in our policy.
Right.
So wait, you're saying E through J is in 306?
Also,
Yep.
Yes.
It is spelled something. I don't think I.
.306s are huge, there's probably 70 or 80 pages worth, so there's links, if you will put them
Yep.
memo, links in here, you can scroll through. Oh, okay, that's where you guys, I'm.
So if those are in it,
Mhm.
then it's equal policy. Well, they're actually in the 306 rules. Oh, so in that case, that's, we should make more sense, I think, to keep it. Yeah, seems to be verbatim, so. But interestingly, we're missing one. So under, well, after line 73, activities to promote the development of reading, viewing, and listening skills. Yeah. Maybe we should put that in. Put that in.
Would that be a K, JK?
Yep.
Did you send me that?
Yep.
It looks like it was gonna go in there, and then there's a blank next to
They
74.
might have missed that.
Yeah, you're right.
This, deadline of October 15th of every third year, beginning 2027. Is that something, that's something new, obviously, right?
We put that date in there because what this basically is the curriculum review cycle. And districts should have this in place every 3 to 5 years. You know what's getting replaced so that you can budget for it. And in the sample policy from NHSBA, they said, we recommend you starting in 2027 so that people can sort of get their feet under them. I think because of the way our strategic plan is written, we're probably gonna get there sooner. But just in case something goes awry, 2027 gives us time to sort of set that up.
Um. So there's one other piece in the 306 that we don't have either, which is right after that, activities to promote development of reading. And it's D, and it says implements a plan approved by district administration for outgoing, or sorry, for ongoing development, organization, acquisition, maintenance.
That's actually line 78 through 81.
Oh, okay, let's just, okay, just added, sorry, I didn't see the whole, or recognize it with the superintendent credit.
It's written more instead of being a rule, it's written more in policy speak so that people know how it's supposed to be carried out.
Okay. Does it need to say the superintendent or designate there?
We have 4 superintendents.
Superintendent directs, so they can direct.
Well, no,
Superintendent.
superintendent, since the superintendent is directed to prepare,
Yes, they can be directed and then they can direct somebody else to.
so you don't think they need to have a designate?
You can put or designate that helps with consistency.
That's, I think. Do others care if we put that, if we add
Yeah.
or designate?
I think it's fine to have this.
And it's line 78 or designate.
Or designate.
Okay, because I do think it's consistent with the rest of our policies. Okay. Okay. Feel good about that one, everyone? So that's the same for second read, right? Okay.
This one?
Yes, please.
Numerous questions about terminology in the policy were discussed in addition to the need to review the specificity of 306 rules tied to this policy. Policy committee would review the concerns raised and rework the policy.
And I have one of, fire that you pointed out, with the sample policy. The piece about double dipping essentially, where you shouldn't be able to get credit for. Twice. Or,
I think what I was saying was that previously we had,
right, but the new,
and the new one did,
the new one doesn't,
that seems like,
that's something to consider. But it seemed like there was a lot of confusion on this one. About the number of credits or the course load at any given time versus the total percentage of the course load that was some other experience besides just sitting in a classroom. So.
In the 306 section of this, in the actual rule is huge. It's 4 pages long. And so that's why the policy is as long as it is. And these definitions come direct from the 306 definitions.
Okay.
So those are listed straight there. Awarding credits based on competency demonstration, that comes out of multiple sections in the 306s. I mean, this one is pretty involved. And I don't know. I don't know if this is something we want to put until next time, where we can spend more time on it and folks can come looking, having looked at it ahead of time, comparing it to the 306s. I don't want to try to solve it in 20 minutes. That's, I just worry that we're not gonna get into it the right way.
I agree, because I think that the inquiries into this one weren't very specific. They were sort of more like noting that there were inconsistencies
I mean,
across the different.
Paulette's
That's-
reading of the minutes is like, it's not good, rework it.
Exactly.
Like, it doesn't,
So,
And unless you've read through the 4 pages in the rule and like done a side by side
I think that's what we have to do.
to see what is it that trying to say, what is it we want to say, what is it gonna look like
We have,
on the ground?
well, maybe just, well, I guess we can put off the whole thing until next time.
Yep.
But I did have a couple specifics. Well, it was that piece that you pointed out, and there was definitely confusion about the number of the 3 or 5 credits per year. And then 1/3 of the course load to graduate. So anyway, I guess if when we are doing our revisions, we should look into those sort of like specifics about credits and.
Mhm. What lines are those from?
152, yeah, one of them's on 152, that's the credits for at least 1/3 the total number of credits for graduation. And the other ones, but I know Lisa pointed something out that was that there's definitely some inconsistencies across the 306s and then other RSAs, but I think, it was like, they're at the same time, they're saying you don't have to take English every year. But no, I'm sorry, it's the other way around. It's like we can have fewer credits of English, but they encourage you to take it every year or something. So it's like, how do we make that a reality?
Well, that's part of the work that we're gonna need to be doing at the high school,
Uh-huh.
coming up with trying to get what we're gonna need to do, and we've already started doing this work, is aligning courses with the competencies that need to be met, instead of thinking about you need to take
Right.
this course and then you take this course. Well, what competencies are contained in that course?
Mhm.
And if you take that course and it covers 7 competencies, well, if 2 of those competencies are in this other course, then you don't necessarily need that course. So all of that work has to be done. But we're also in this like cart before the horse thing where we've got the rules in place, but we don't have all of the competencies mapped to courses yet.
Mhm.
So we're gonna have to, one of them has to be put in place, and the additional thing is the competency impact on students is starting with next year's 9th graders. So we have to put it in place so that we can start to map this out for them,
Mhm.
thinking about, okay, by the time they leave, this is the reality.
Mhm. Okay, which is why you feel like this is a good time to implement this policy, even if we're still developing how we handle it.
Yeah, because we're already starting to look at what are the 9th graders gonna be taking, what competencies are they gonna be covering? There's just expectations, in different departments about what's being offered when, who, like, there's just a lot of things are gonna come from that.
Mhm.
It's gonna have a budgetary impact too.
Okay. I found the other thing that was just that Carrie had asked to have, a couple additional things added to the definitions section, which were, to define learning opportunities versus interdisciplinary credit.
Definitions that are here,
Learning definition or learning opportunities.
the definitions that are here came straight out of the 306s.
Okay.
So these are their definitions.
Mhm.
Just want to find,
Okay, well, maybe we can add interdisciplinary credit to it if that's helpful.
I might have it in their materials, yeah, so we could look at that. But again, all right, if you do your side by side, the next meeting, some of this, probably will have a better handle on it.
Yeah.
Because then once we put IK in place, we can get rid of IKA, which is excellent.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
Have fun, Susan, this is great fun, isn't it?
It's a whole new world.
It is. How are they doing over there?
Used to be this complicated, that's for sure.
They make it more complex.
Right, but we don't want to eliminate it
Because before we get this one.
Right.
done.
right, so we're gonna have to hold off on that one again too. Then I don't know if you have answered this, but we did have a conversation about whether or not, first of all, whether an elimination of a policy should require 2 readings. You can't really do that. Because if you vote to eliminate it, it's eliminated.
I mean, I guess you would put it on the agenda. I mean, really
You'd have it.
what you're trying to address is giving notice to people
Right.
that you're gonna take some action, right? And give them an opportunity to come in and speak in public comment about it.
Okay.
So that would be the purpose of you put it on the agenda and you say, we're going to discuss this at the next meeting. So anybody who wants to have comment can come if they missed it when it first came up on the agenda.
So the first action wouldn't be a board action, it would just be an informational item around the intent to remove the policy in the future.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
I mean, for everything that the city council does, that's the intention of having that first reading, second reading, third reading, is that you have notice of, for the first reading. Then the second reading is for public comment.
Okay, that's helpful. So I think in this case, we did bring this one up already and we offered time for discussion on it. We didn't really have any discussion on it, but
It's one of the ones
so
that's
when it
getting
comes back.
subsumed into, that's why it's going away, because that's why that policy is so huge, because
Okay.
everything's then.
Yeah, but can we eliminate IKAA if we don't pass IK?
No, that's the problem. So we don't want it to, we don't want it to be on the, we don't want it to be on the agenda until. Until we get an IKA, I mean, IK approved. Right, or I suppose it could happen at the same meeting.
We could do
Only
that,
if we approve.
right, which we've got to figure out what it means.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I think that's something. All right,
I know the homework you're soliciting input, and Zach also has been gathering some
Well,
information on that.
oh, yeah, okay, good. I didn't push the survey concept because you guys were also doing the other surveying at the same time, so I didn't think it was a very good idea to layer on another survey, so we're just.
He reached out in last week's Monday memo, I think it was, to our people, like inside people,
Great.
for input.
Okay,
So I suppose you could let community know.
Yeah.
And then we could discuss this one at a later date, once we've, another one that, maybe that's a January discussion, just once you've looked at feedback.
yeah, it's certainly not, yeah. But it might be helpful. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. I was gonna say it might be helpful to know the information from the administrators or whoever he's seeking info from. Time, but,
He
Yeah.
should have it,
matter.
so he should have it, but I'm thinking if you have that group.
Yeah.
Then you send it out to the community and you get that information, and maybe in January we bring this one up, so that we've already had a chance to look at it all.
Yeah.
And it'll inform the discussion.
For sure. Okay. So do you think you can send us that information? Okay, yep, that would be great. Okay, I'm gonna try to put that together. It's a terrible time to survey people, but. We'll try to do it.
Like this one's not like,
It can be.
this is not like time sensitive, the homework is not.
Right.
Cause you could push that off into, February if you want
I
to.
mean, it's homework, procrastination, it's just like.
Well, it's right, that's policy. I mean, the ones that I would be more concerned with are like, graduation requirements, or the one we just looked at, which is credit, how are they getting credit? Those are the ones that I would.
Yeah.
Maybe look at,
I agree.
yeah.
It's the homework part of this 306 too.
But it's not very specific.
No,
That's the
it's,
thing.
it's,
So,
it's very flexible to what the board would want.
which is good, which is good.
It's
just
really
that
good.
Because it's so flexible, I had wanted to get some input on it. I think it's a good time to kind of revisit it. That's the rule changes and get some input from.
And just because it's levels that listed there, doesn't mean you have to address it in that order. You will push it after.
Okay, well, should we look at high school graduation requirements quickly?
Another one that's fair.
I know, maybe it's not quick.
And I feel like that one paired with credits. This is the one I think most of the conversation was around whether or not there was going to be a separately titled
Yes.
diploma if students were not, if students did more than the basic 20 that are now required by state law.
Which was something I thought we had talked about bringing to the board's workshop.
We did bring it to board, and we had, I think maybe we don't have that meeting. But I know that you were the one here in this committee that felt like you might like the concept of,
Hearing.
yes, but it did not like.
Yeah.
And I think that was sort of the main issue, like I think everything else was okay.
Yeah, but the rest of it was fine. It
Right,
was,
it hasn't been very long since we've actually.
So the net result of that is that there is one diploma and you can get it with 20 credits.
No,
No,
no, there's still different diplomas, they just don't have different names. I think the discussion that we were having was whether or not to give, like, have tiers as in like summa cum laude and
so
cum laude.
I'm confused by
Well,
Not the honors.
Yeah.
That's a separate.
No, if it was gonna say New Hampshire Basic Diploma. Portsmouth Diploma, like if it's a diploma from the high school, you've graduated high school.
So,
Right, like there's diploma with distinction. for
Mhm.
instance.
right, so I'm confused with what you just said because the difference between a diploma gotten like 20 credits versus 25 credits is what?
There isn't.
There is no.
Well, right, I mean, the difference is how many credits you earned, but there's no formal distinction.
So that's right, so what I just said was that there's one diploma and you can get it with 20 credits.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
You can get it with 22, you can get it with 23.
Right.
And, but it's gonna show up on the transcript. What you took and how many credits you got, as long as you hit that magic number of 20.
Yeah.
You've got your diploma.
So I guess my question then to the administration is like, what leverage is there, if any, to have students go beyond 20 credits?
Students are already doing more than they need to, because they
I
do,
remember when kids do.
they do seek out more opportunities than they have to. Because they're interested in this, they want to learn more about this. And since the conversation we had last year about this, because that's when we put the 20 credit into place.
Hmm.
There is no message coming from the counseling department about, well, you really only need 20. So stop here and you're done. It's about figure out who you are, get all the information you can, try out all the courses you want, learn as much as you can. It's not about limiting the
So-
opportunities.
I guess the defense against students doing the bare minimum is that our counseling department is not suggesting that they do the bare minimum.
Yeah, there's no, it exists.
Yeah.
But it's not being cold sold as the best way to go.
I think I'll-
Seen as a safety net, really, the 20.
Yeah,
I mean, I understand what they're trying to do, which is, I think there's a part to it. I just think that like the net result will be the erosion of, like overall in terms of like what students are doing. I think you will see, because it's not required, less being done by students to get their diplomas.
I think maybe statewide,
Yeah.
the goal of the 306s is to do less.
Simply less. Yeah.
And there's a financial piece of this.
And when and like maybe I'll just take a go at this the board we get there too. It's just like we have the opportunity, we can do something at the local level, like in official capacity to sort of work against this in terms of that minimum, even if it's, you know, and I understand like the reasons why tiering is problematic, but I just want to put that concern is that ultimately what will happen is potentially the erosion of like what the bar, right? We're lowering the bar.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the bar has been lowered by
The
the
bar.
state.
But we can do
We
something.
still, we
Yeah,
still
yeah.
can say to students,
yeah. This,
you do
this,
do
yeah,
as much as you want, as
Yeah.
much as you can possibly do. Still have the robust offerings that we have so that they can continue to say, oh, I'm interested in that. I want to take that junior. I want to like all of
I
that.
think the way I may have phrased it is like in 2026, if you complete 25 credits as you did in 2025, right? That level of academic accomplishment will result in, you know, accreditation as such, right? And it won't be devalued to the degree that like someone will look at that and they'll have their own transcript, but the diploma itself won't be. And I'll try and phrase that. And like I understand that well, but yeah.
Well, when you say that we can do something about it, what do you see that we can do about it?
Well, because by offering by offering a diploma, which is like a Portsmouth diploma versus like a state minimum diploma,
Mhm.
right? It's you know, I think it holds water in terms of you know what that means because there's policy associated with it. It defines what the requirements are for that, and people understand. Oh, you went through sort of what was like the traditional academic rigor of getting that diploma, as opposed to some new lower bar for a diploma.
Okay, so you feel like naming it does.
I think it's,
Somehow a designation has to be put on the diploma.
yeah, I mean, I guess the other approach you could take is I think it's a little mushy in terms of like, you know, we have our we have definitions of honors and those sorts of things, and those are designations. So like, if it's a credit-based system that's giving you a designation versus some sort of grade-based system, like, I don't know if I see a huge distinction there in terms of the philosophy of why you would offer those distinctions.
Well, so I appreciate that you're saying that you'll say that at the board level, but in terms of what we're
Yeah.
doing here.
Yeah.
What do?
Do we want to change that?
Yeah.
No, I'm fine with going. I'll just say my piece on it. Yeah. I don't wanna hold up. I think if the board's will, that's that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was my takeaway from the discussion that we had. Was that it was we were concerns about. And yes, creating exclusivity and things, and I think that's consistent with our moving away from the GPA and class ranking.
And we have students who get Global Scholar, we have students who get New Hampshire Scott, like there's already like other things that they're striving for, so it's not like there aren't other opportunities for like stretching and growing, but I think you know, what we're seeing is students are just they're continuing to pursue opportunities.
And many do end up with 30 credits, or
Yes.
right,
Yeah.
many more than they've ever
Yes.
had to. So so I think the way our policy was written, I'm looking at.
IKF,
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just looking between the sample one, but ours does not include, as it's written now, it doesn't include different titles, right?
no,
No, it's just the sample one. Okay, so we would just be presenting it for the second reading as is.
To further confuse things, but I could just trying to keep up with all of you and your policies. I was reading this memo from.
Yeah.
And he's saying offering multiple diploma pathways. By flexibility, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
So academic diploma versus academic diploma with distinction, New Hampshire minimum standards diploma.
That's what I was, yeah, and I guess what I was trying to articulate is we have these other distinctions. They're just based on not necessarily credits as the, and so I think the concept of distinction isn't going away. We're not eliminating distinction entirely. And so I feel like it's a little bit inconsistent logically to say that this is moving towards inequity by offering these tiers because we already have distinction. So I don't find consistency in our paper.
Well, I think the Latin honors though isn't a policy of our schools or our district. That's sort of a national program, isn't it true? Or one Latin honors? I think so. So, but I mean, I think your point is a valid one, where we are doing it and we're not at the same time.
Yeah.
For different things.
For different things, yeah.
But regarding the memo, the way I'm understanding what he's saying is that offering the different tiers or the different levels of the diploma at different credit levels is important, but I don't think he's supporting the naming of them with different distinctions that way.
and he's looking at it again
How
from
would
a
you
special
think?
ed viewpoint, if prior to going to 20 credits, there was a different level that was expected for students in IEPs. And that was sort of off to the side, and it was just offered to students with IEPs, where now they've opened up this 20 credit option to everybody, including students in IEPs. So it's destigmatized that 20 credit diploma because you could have a student move in from out of state who only has X amount. you could have a student who wants to early graduate in January because their family is moving to North Carolina and they want to be done at 20 credits and that's where they want to be finished is with their friends. So what it did was it just destigmatized that. So having all of that available, keeps us within our equity, conversation. The only other thing I would point out is we're gonna need to reorder the sections
Mhm.
in the policy because early graduation needs to be moved up. Like before the credit requirements, so when Paulette revises this, the section order is going to have to mimic what's in the sample policy because it talks about a diploma being awarded at 20 credit minimum, then you've got your early graduation, then you've got your credits. Then you've got the section on special education, then talks about civics and citizenship tests. Which is different than it was in our current policy, which is just the civics exam. It's the citizenship test now, the test that's given. So that needs to be named. And then the FAFSA piece comes in at the end.
Okay, but why does early graduation need to move? I'm not understanding that. Just because it doesn't make sense where it is?
Right. Okay, because it's like it's an afterthought.
I see. And so where do you think it should go?
It, according to the sample policy, it's up before the credit.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So if you look at the order, the section order has been sort of shuffled.
Yeah.
So it tells you you need 20, you can graduate early. If you're a special education student, you can get this.
Mhm.
You have to have your civics citizenship test done and the FAFSA.
I'm sorry, what were you saying about did something need to change in our current policy on the civics exam?
It's now not just a random civics exam, they're calling it out as the citizenship test. So if you look at the sample policy, section E talks about passage of civics exam and US citizenship test.
Okay. I see. I thought we'd already altered our policy to match this one minus the designation. So I missed that. Okay, that's helpful.
So can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Because I'm very confused.
Yes.
This is a substantial rewrite.
It is.
So, yes, if we look at our existing to the New Hampshire School Board Association, so was the initial intent to mimic New Hampshire School Board? Because otherwise, I'm not confident with what your feedback is right now that I'd be capturing.
The big conversation that we had at the board was about multiple types of diplomas, which is in section A in the sample policy. And instead of putting in section A with the multi-diploma option, what I'm hearing, or it said was, it was the single diploma option, which is that one paragraph there.
Yeah, okay. I am now understanding where I got confused. So we actually haven't presented this policy to the board. We just talked about it at the board level. That's why I'm confused. I was thinking we already had a first reading.
Mm-mm.
Okay. So yes, you're right. So I think that we are saying go with the single option. No, wait.
So I guess.
No, I think we still want to offer the different levels of diploma, but without giving them a name.
So then that's a
No,
single
that's
diploma.
really nothing.
Then that's a single.
That was your point at the very beginning.
They have to get a minimum of 20 credits, which is the minimum.
And then it doesn't matter if you go above that or not.
Right,
You're
because we're not
get
gonna call it anything different.
Okay.
Which is what I'm.
Got it.
Then we say there's early graduation, which brings it up from the back and also talks about IKFA.
Okay, so can I pause?
Yeah.
Can we look at the New Hampshire School Board Association sample?
Yep.
Am I using that first paragraph?
In pursuit of,
Yep, because am I going
somewhere to start.
I do. Where's my base? Am I using New Hampshire School Board and making tweaks to that, or am I using ours and making tweaks to that? Because when you're talking about moving so many things, it makes sense more to me to use the New Hampshire School Board Association and make tweaks to that one.
Yeah.
If that's in the correct order. but maybe I'm not looking at this.
So here's where the hangup gets with that first paragraph. If you're down where the yellow highlight is, we haven't finished policy IK.
Oh,
Cause this talks about policy IK, which we just said, let's pause on that.
I think you need to make that a priority.
Well, but, so if we could pause on this to not present this until we finished IK,
that kind of makes.
because they're links.
Yeah, we need to get through IK.
Mhm.
And this one also, oh no, that's not. Big things. Yeah, I think that's true.
But we're not doing anything with this one.
Okay.
But I do think once we get to Paulette, like I'm in favor of
Okay.
ripping off the.
Yes,
Okay.
let's start with there.
Well, and if you're thinking that way, what I'll do is I will take this and do strike through the whole thing and pop the.
Because I love the line numbers. I'm so sad with the sample
Yeah,
policy.
yeah.
The no line.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah.
So I'll do that.
Don't they? They shouldn't do
Yeah.
Yeah, I think,
Easy
and I
to talk
think
about.
doing,
Well, I mean,
being able to do the
software
same
is
thing kind of that we did, that we're doing with IK and
Like this one.
the comparison of the two will be helpful.
Yep.
As well. Okay, well, we're officially out of time.
We have that many more to go.
Oh, yes.
Well, but you.
We've got a bunch that we're rescinding though, so that's a
That's
good
good,
thing.
yeah. And I think I mean, we've already discussed most of these where we felt like we could rescind them, except that we haven't passed IK yet.
Right. The one that everything is leaning on, or the ones that everything is leaning on, haven't been,
Is that IK? Yeah,
IK is a big one, yeah.
so, so really, we just have those physical, those two that we didn't get to today.
Right.
Is there any, urgency with those two?
Right, 306.
They're all-
Yes, everything's part of that gargantuan change.
Yeah.
Can we do that or do you
I
want to stop?
have some. I think we need to just stop because everybody has other things.
Yeah.
But I would love some input from, specifically on the daily physical activity time. I have, okay. I have specific, or I'm interested in input from like Phil Davis and the high school in terms of whether there's any physical activity, thank you, Susan.
Yep, you're welcome.
Whether there's any, like what they do at those levels for physical activity. So, do you think in the meantime, we could get like a memo from them, or I mean, I'm happy to
Yeah.
request that too, but.
I can ask for that.
Okay, that would be awesome. What they do and whether they would change what they're doing. For any reason. There's like, if there's anything we can do policy wise to support. What they would like to do. Okay. We have our next meeting set for December 17th at 11. That's for me. December 30th, else.
December.
December 17th, yeah.
So far away. You sure it's that far away? Maybe. It's not
Well,
that
because
far away.
we got holidays and,
Thanksgiving, okay.
no, it is far away.
Yes, that's fine.
Do you think we should add time and try to? The New
Yeah.
Hampshire School Board
No, we're getting behind.
update is gonna hit
Yeah.
any second.
Okay, I'm open to that. Or is there a reason we're not doing it on the 3rd of December? Right, we can either we could do two meetings, or we could make this one even longer.
I think we should do the third.
Do the 3rd,
I can do the 3rd,
looks like I can too.
What time?
11 again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we'll keep the 17th?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Okay, just in case.
Oh, you'll need it.
What?
Oh, I know.
Someone said just in case.
Exactly.
You'll need it.
All right.
The truth.
I know.
Well, it seems this hopeful, don't you think?
Yeah.
I think so. I have, the different time and